Hi everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Part 2 Book Club, where Shan and I have a fascinating conversation with an old school friend, Jamie Koo. Jamie is a work play coach, so she helps people to find some time in their lives and in their working day to rest, to play, and to just slow down. So really fascinating. I hope you guys enjoy it. Jamie, so I was going to ask you about, so you've got a really very interesting life experience in terms of where you started work-wise. So as a writer or a journalist, is that right? Writing for Elle? Was it Elle?
Yeah, this is interesting. So my very first job was an internship at Accenture, which makes people laugh. I've literally had friends laugh in my face when I told them that, because they were like, "What? You are in a corporate space? What?" So that was, I only did that for a month, and I decided, I was only 19 at the time, and it was in Malaysia. And already at that age, I was like, I hate this shit. I'm never going. It's terrible. It's just not me. Then I was a journalist for a while. I then worked in a spiritual organization for 8 years, which then did not turn out well. Ended up being a very high control, an abusive situation. So I left that, went back into journalism, and that was when I worked at Elle, the Malaysian edition of Elle. And then decided to go back and be a student, so that I went back and did my PhD. I finished it around COVID, so that was an interesting time for all of us, I guess. And then since then, I've been building out my own thing. So I was, after finishing my PhD, I was a PhD trainer and coach. I still do PhD training now. And just recently, literally like 2 months ago, I've pivoted from PhD coaching to work play coaching. Yeah, that's still quite new.
So can you tell us about your PhD, a little bit more about what you were studying? Because again, I was part of your...
that was fun.
You interviewed me, and me and Alina and lots of others. Yeah, what was it about, and why did you decide to do a PhD? Because that's not just like a whim. It's not like a 1-year master's. That's like fully...
It's not a master's. It's like
it's like fully committed, a lot tougher.
I think at heart, I'm always going to be a big nerd. Like, I just love, this does sound really nerdy now. I'm totally going to just geek out. But I do just love that whole process of learning. I love the whole sort of education and knowledge and like going deep into things, going down little rabbit holes, reading. And it was also just, it was a time I'd just come out of the bad place. Let's just call it the bad place. And I just wanted a whole fresh new start, doing something away, like physically away from Malaysia. And also, this is interesting as well, like, it was from working in a fashion magazine that made me decide to go into some PhD. So, when you work in a fashion magazine, it's very glamorous. There's lots of, you're dealing and trading in beauty every day, like beautiful things, beautiful people. And I just remember sitting in editorial meetings, and we'd be talking about, who to feature, what's put in our magazines, realities, people to interview, that sort of thing. At the end of all our discussions, we would come back to this question. Nobody wanted to ask this. We would have to. And that was like, we have to ask question, but is she pretty? It was just, you could talk all day long about how wonderful this person was, how much she contributed to society. But at the end of the day, it was, how is she going to look? How does she translate into a photograph? Like, how does she photograph well? And if she doesn't, can we make her look acceptable, And I mean, that's just the reality of working in a fashion magazine, right? I'm not trying to slander anybody. Like, that is what you trade in, right? You trade in how beautiful things look like. So I started to get really disillusioned, because I'm always really idealistic. Like, I want to change the world. I want to make the world a better place, and all of this, and feeling very stuck. I guess there was always going to be a glass ceiling there. yeah, I decided, let's go back to research and academia and that space and really dive deep into what beauty means today and how do women themselves make sense of what beauty ideals mean to them, how does it play out in their lives, and how do they resist them to try and create like new definitions of beauty, or how are they finding, negotiating and navigating their way around these ideals. So that's what I did in my PhD.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you find, I mean, on the topic of beauty, because I find that so interesting, because there's, I think, maybe a shift, or what seems to be a bit more of a shift away from your classic beautiful person back then, or maybe in the 90s. And obviously what was beautiful back then, I think now I feel like people are more embracing of looks, shapes, sizes. Or do you think that's a front? Do you think that's just this is how we want to be perceived, but actually deep down we're still very shallow, and beauty is someone who's really aesthetically pretty and,
Well, I
flawless.
think going back to the Love Island discussion, I think we can talk about all this stuff until we house tomorrow, but the wider world and all the beauty types are like the types of people on things like Love Island, and it is still a very particular type, isn't it? And I know that Love Island tries to be diverse. It tries to, now there are like different races and different ethnicities on it, and they even have like differently abled bodies now, right? Like there was one year where there was someone who was like partially deaf. I think this year there's somebody who has like one arm is shorter or smaller than her other arm, and it's like there, so she's considered differently abled or disabled. But it's still,
they all still look good in a bikini.
It's still a very palatable kind of, it's nothing that would make people feel that uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I think we still have a ways to go. I mean, what I ended up arguing in my thesis, which is it's sort of circular, and it's sort of a vicious cycle. Like I was saying that we've moved into a space now which some people refer to as post-feminism, which is this sense that we've all got equality now. It's all fine. Like we don't need to fight for equal rights anymore. And as a result of that, now we can be the sexy. We can pay up on the femininity, because this is now me reclaiming my power. Like I'm choosing to present in this sort of sexy, hyper feminized way, and it's using feminism almost against itself. It's saying, oh, well, we've all got choice now, we're all free, we've all got equal rights, and I'm using those choices and those equal rights to play up into this particular ideal. That makes sense, because I know it's a little bit sort of
makes sense.
So
that way it does make sense.
So then it's like, well, where do we go then? Because then you also can't critique and completely criticize people wanting to look like the Love Island ideal, because the argument is like, oh, but it's about choice.
Their choice,
But it's never fully a choice, because we're still, we're still working within certain ideals and certain constraints, right?
And you do wonder, you say it's their choice, but what choice to what end? Why have they chosen to do that? Like, what is the end game for these people?
Exactly,
That's really interesting.
Or like, what are they choosing from, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And, okay, we all have choices, but also some people have more access to more choice than others. And also, I have choices, but if you make the wrong choice, then you'll be punished for it, or, you won't be rewarded for it, or whatever, If you choose to, do your lips and do Botox and present as Love Island, then you're more likely to, I don't know, get a brand deal with Pretty Little Thing or whatever. If you choose, to not do any of that, to be a larger body, or to not wear makeup, then yeah, that's a choice. But then, the opportunities may then be different for you. So yeah.
Definitely. And I think everyone, so we're all trying to move towards this. Beauty there's no standard. There is no one size fits all. Curvy is beautiful, muscular is beautiful, skinny is beautiful, your body is just beautiful regardless. But I think what social media and the just sort of internet trolls in general, everybody's a keyboard warrior. Mm-hmm. Everybody has an opinion, and a certain group of people feel like you need to know their opinion.
I think that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because social media gives everyone the tools for self-expression. As long as you have a phone and an internet connection, like, you can put yourself out there. So that's great. Like, it's almost like it feels a little bit more egalitarian. Like, everyone has that same platform or access to that same platform. But then, at the same time, then you're opening yourself up to so much attack and all of that. And I think it's also, even if you're not being attacked or trolled, because it's so accessible now as well, and this is something that has come up a lot in sort of writings and literature around body image and self-esteem, especially among younger women, is that, in the past, like, as we were growing up, we had, the supermodels and billboards to compare, right? Like, okay, it's like me or Susie Crawford or whatever. Like, that was those idols in the day. But now it's like your best friend could be so much more successful or have so many more followers or whatever. So then the comparison, like the gap between who you're comparing to, like, shrinks all the way down. Like, so comparison, competitiveness, all of that is heightened and amplified. And I mean, there's been loads of studies done, right, on how detrimental, like, social media is at the moment for young women, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like you said, maybe because it's just been going back generations and generations of the same message being
seen
ingrained in us.
Yeah, exactly. And conventionally, traditionally as well, it's the women who have to make the home nice. Like, we're in charge of making sure that everyone is served and happy, right? I mean, in Chinese families, it's always like the men will eat first before. Not anymore.
Sorry, is it still okay?
I hope not. And so even though we're not doing that, and even though we're not, putting out our husband's slippers, and we're not, cooking dinner by 5 o'clock every night or whatever, like,
doing any of that.
But I think some of that element of wanting to be nice, right, the pleasing thing seems to show up, I guess, in women more.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is, because I've got 2 young daughters, so the one's 8 and one's 10 now, but even from a younger age, so I remember when Millie was she was in year 2 over lockdown, and at the end of the online class, end of the school year, the teacher, male teacher, not to say a female teacher wouldn't do it, but I think it just stuck in my head that they were giving out awards of who would be this and who would be the most likely to whatever. And I think I was doing some work, and then I came in just to watch a bit of it. And a lot of the girls were getting, like, the kindest or the most helpful and most likely to be. And then, I mean, I could feel the anger. And then the boys like, race car driver, da da da. And I was like, waiting to see what Amelia would get, because I would have, and she got doctor, so I was like,
Yes.
okay, I can do this. You're helpful, you're smart, we can do doctor. But if she got,
child
and
doctor.
I was so close to, because it get, the idea of the gender stereotypes and the jobs and what they should and shouldn't be starts at such a young age, and even that, and it wasn't done maliciously, of course. It was, consciously this was what they were doing, but it was still driving the stereotypes.
It does start from something. We think it's small, but that's kind of what builds a child's personality, right, as they're growing up. I'm very conscious now of, like, when I see, say, my cousin's children, and I see all the other relatives, when they see the little girls, they always say, "Oh, you look so pretty today." And then the boys will always be like, "Oh, wow, that you're so smart," or like, "Oh, you're so brave." Like, it's the kinds of adjectives we use for girls and boys. So girls are about, like, looking pretty and sweet and, like, being pleasing. And boys are, encouraged and praised for being outgoing and being, sporty and brave. And it works the other way as well. It then also means that, if a boy is a little bit quieter, he gets teased. Like, why are you not more active? Oh, sissy, oh, you boys shouldn't cry, and those kinds of things, which leads to a whole other kind of issue, right? Yeah, because I remember things being said about me as a child that have stayed with me, and they would just, throw away comments, that my dad or whatever people would have said at school. I mean, I was a pretty chubby kid at school, as you probably remember, and people would have said things that they probably don't even remember saying. That
what I found as well, Malaysians, I don't know about other Asian countries because I don't have the experience there. Asians have the need, or a certain generation of Malaysians have the need to tell you if they think you're fat.
Yes.
Unsolicited. Like, the number of times, and she stopped now because I blew up at her one day, but my mum, if I went home, if I'd put on a little bit of weight, because I was slim when I was younger, and, like, the first time I put on a bit of weight at uni, and I went home and my mum was like, "Oh, you're getting really fat." Or even when I was a size 10, she was like, "Look at your belly, you want to be careful." And I'm like,
"Do you want to be?" And you were like, what, 20 at the time, maybe?
Yeah, 20. I had, like, a little roll of fat, but otherwise I was a size 10. Like, come on. And she was like, "Oh, look at your belly, you want to be careful because, you're just gonna get really fat." And I'm like, it's that life isn't about your weight.
I was going to ask you about this, Jamie, because I think for us as kids of Asian parents, or Sean, like, part Asian parents, the expectations, I think, on us growing up, or the stereotypical, like, you should be a lawyer, doctor, whatever, blah blah blah, corporate, and then to buck that trend, Jamie, like, how have your parents been? Because I've seen snippets and I love it when you were writing stuff on Facebook and fully winding up your mum and dad. But how has it been, and then how are they now with this?
Okay.
So what you're doing is cool now, and, like, I just think it's a great story, and I think I'm just I love it, but at the same time, like, oh, but what's like auntie and uncle thinking?
So my mum is very bohemian. She's very like, she's always been like that, like, since I was a child. I don't know if you ever met my mum, but she's very much like, do what you like, do what makes you happy. It's all fine, proud of you, whatever you do. Like, she's very she's very Western in that way, like, very much like, you carve and build out your own life. My dad tries to be like that, but at his core, he's a Chinapet uncle. Okay? He's a Chinese uncle, right? So there have been many conversations where he's like, what are you doing? Like, why, you're so qualified. Why don't you just get a job in a bank? That's the big thing. Like, that is the thing. Like, go
at the threshold.
Bank. Yeah.
That's the bank.
Work in a bank, or, like, be a consultant, or something with a big name. Like, that's a very Asian thing, right? Like, the prestige of working in a big five or
Yeah.
one of those top bank.
Yeah.
Which is like, which brings me back to that thing. I'm like, you know, I did that 1 month in the center and I was like, get me out of here.
Not for me.
I think you have to be a particular kind of person to work in those environments, and that's just not me. Right?
Yeah, it's not the most fun, I have to say. Like, you would absolutely hate working in a bank.
People really thrive in it. I know people who do.
Yeah.
It's not me. My brain is not wired that way. So I think he's kind of come to terms now. Like, he has said, look, I just want you to be safe and happy at the end of the day, and I just want you to be okay financially and all of that. But still, like, every time I go back, we will at some point have a conversation where he will ask me, so what's your plan now? So,
With the accent, I love it.
So what's your plan? Let's have a plan, you know. Otherwise, years will pass and nothing will happen. You have to make a plan. And I have kind of, so that was a real, and I think this is something that maybe all children of Asians go through at some point, of Asian parents, feeling like, oh, I'm sort of letting the family down, or like I'm not upholding like the family expectation or whatever. And that has been a bit of a journey. Like, my parents are not that typical Asian parents, but there is still always that, you know, all of my family have gone into finance or accounting, and I'm like this one black sheep who's like did a PhD in women's studies. Now starting my own business from scratch. Like, what the hell are you doing? You know, why don't you just go get a job in a bank?
Work in a bank.
Yeah. But I think it was really, and this is hard, I think, because in Asian families, the family unit is so strong in Asian families, isn't it? It's not quite the same with Western families. Like, I see this with my partner, Stuart. Like, he's very close with his parents, but there's very much a sense of like, you are your own person. And, you know, we're a family, but we're also individuals. Whereas I think in Asian communities and families, family is first, isn't it? It's very much like a sense of family community, and family comes first, and the whole notion of like filial piety, like you've got to respect and love your parents first and all of that. Not being a disappointment to your family, not being a bad reflection on your family and all of that. It was hard to kind of separate myself from that, because whatever I'm doing, I felt like it would somehow reflect on my parents, right? And it was a journey to get to the point to really like actually see myself as a separate person. Right? Like, actually, my dad would have all these concerns or expectations or his idea of what it would mean to be successful, but that doesn't have to be something I take on. Like, that is that he has come from a world where that is what success was, and that is what it means to be doing well or thriving in the world. But that's not my world, and those do not have to be my values. Like, I think it was getting to a point where I realized, like, I can still love him as my father and respect him as my father without having to take on his expectations for me. I think they're actually two separate things. So it's a great book for you, since this is partially a book podcast.
Okay, good. Yes.
I really, really recommend reading Simu Liu's memoir, We Were Dreamers.
We Were Dreaming. I'll write this down.
Simu Liu, he's I don't know if you know it. Like, are you into like superhero films? Marvel. He played Shang-Chi.
That's a really good movie, actually.
Yes, but then like before that, I think he was known for being in that Canadian sitcom called Kim's Convenience, which is on Netflix.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I've heard of Kim's Convenience.
Yeah, it's about a Korean Canadian family, but he is Chinese himself. And it's a really well written memoir. It's not. I think he would have written it himself. It's not one of these terrible like Kim Kardashian type memoirs. Like, it's really good. Like, so it's about it's an immigrant story, basically. It's about how his parents migrated from China into Canada and how he was then brought over as a child into Canada, and how his whole life basically has been this tension between wanting to live out his own dream to be an actor and fulfilling what his parents wanted for him. So, I mean, it's a very typical, like, Asian immigrant type story. And I think even though our parents are not quite like that, I think there will be parts in it that will resonate. So, like, there's this, I don't want to give too much away, but like he works as an accountant. I don't know if you knew this, but like before his life as like Marvel's first Asian superhero, like he used to work in Deloitte as an accountant. And like there's like there's a whole chapter about how much he hated it, and I've been feeling the sense of obligation to his parents, and yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed it. I thought it really handled like those nuances of growing up like half Western, half Asian, that tension that I guess all of us have had, right?
Yeah, cool. I'm going to add that to my reading list, which is ever growing. And then I guess can we talk about your work now as a coach? The work play and how did that come about? How what's the kind of ethos behind it, or the way in which you not like how you run your sessions, but what do you do differently? Do you think to the standard way of coaching?
Yeah, so let me just start by saying I started with PhD coaching, so I was coaching PhD students. And what I did was I didn't coach them on the technical aspects of doing a PhD. Like, I don't believe that anyone can really do that. Like, the best person to advise them are their academic supervisors on that. But I guess what I was doing was more life coaching for PhD students. So helping them really kind of manage all the other messy components around doing a PhD. Just because it is quite intense work over a long period of time. There's a lot of issues that come up around things like balance, work-life balance, and personal confidence, and all those kinds of aspects, right, that feed into the research itself. Yeah, I was doing that for a while and then realized like I don't really want to just limit my remit to PhD folk. Like, I do want to work with people out in the real world as well. And I was, to be honest, I was just kind of getting sick of being in academic spaces. So as I was thinking about how to diversify and how to expand my remit, I just kind of thought back to my own story and, what is it that I want to help people with? I myself have struggled with, and then I see other people also kind of still not, I don't know if struggle is a bit of a strong word, but like issues that people are dealing with, I guess, on quite a daily basis, and maybe would like some support on. So I thought back actually to the time in my life when I was working in that spiritual organization, which, as I said before, it was a very, what we would call a high control group. It was very, it was really abusive. It was very, very controlling situation. I am reluctant to use the word cult because that brings a lot of associations, but it felt, there were certain behaviors in there that felt culty. And one of the things that was always leveled at me when I was there was that I was a sleep pig, right? I was always criticized for being a sleep pig. Bearing in mind that we were working ridiculous hours. It was like 16-hour days. We never had days off. And most people were surviving on 3-4 hours of sleep, whenever you could get it. But I was somebody who loved, like, I wanted to sleep, and I would be somebody who would try and get like 8 hours in or whatever. And so that was one of my failings, I guess, like, oh, she's so lazy, like, she just wants to sleep all the time. Like, how fucked up was that, right? Sleep a normal number of hours. So that was leveled at me that I was a sleep pig. The other thing that was leveled at me was that, she does good work, but all she wants to do is have fun. Like that's Jamie's like main priority, that she just wants to have fun. And that was a bad thing. And I just thought, now that I've had some distance from it, and as I was thinking through what I wanted to do, and I thought, you know what, this is the sleep thing and the wanting to have fun thing. Okay, most people are not going to have been in as extreme a situation as I was in, but I think a lot of people in the modern working world struggle with these two issues: getting enough sleep, and having fun, like enjoying what you're doing in your day-to-day life. And then the flip side to that is the feelings of shame and guilt when you do rest and when you do have fun, right? This feeling of like, oh, if I'm resting, that means I'm not working and I'm not productive enough. Or, if I'm having fun, then I can't possibly be doing good work, and I can't, how can anyone take me seriously if I'm having fun, if I'm being playful. So yeah, and I think so many of us go through our working lives feeling like we've got to be, we've got to overwork, we've got to prove ourselves, we've got to be serious while we do it. That was something I saw a lot in PhD students as well, like this feeling like you have to be struggling and suffering in order to be doing a good PhD. And so, the flip side to that is the people who find a lot of pleasure, who are enjoying their PhDs and who are not struggling, they then start second guessing themselves and thinking, oh, I do something wrong because I'm finding this so pleasurable and easy. Obviously, I can't be a good researcher then, right? And I think elements of that carry through all kinds of different types of work and sectors. So, and it doesn't have to be like that, I think we don't have to be working our faces off and making ourselves miserable in order to be a good, productive, valuable human being. Right? So yeah, that's really what my coaching is about, is helping people, first of all, build more rest into their days. Rest doesn't necessarily mean, you're just lying in bed like comatose. It could be just, a series of long naps. But rest can also be play. It can also be, an active kind of rest where you are just doing your hobbies, where you're, gardening in your allotment, you're reading. Yeah. Making space and finding time to be able to enjoy those parts of our lives as well. Like having that trust and belief and confidence in yourself that when you are rested and when you are filled up, not just in terms of physical energy, but in terms of, how motivated you're feeling, how satisfied you're feeling with what you're doing, how pleasurable your days are. When all of that is looked after, then you're going to be doing good work anyway, like regardless, without having to hustle your face off.
Yeah. And where do you think, I recognize, there were parts of my own life and career where I definitely felt like I was overworked, overstressed, and I didn't enjoy saying to people that I was really like busy. But I feel like it's become this almost like the default is you should be busy all the time.
Talk about balance. I always think of like swans, because they always look really graceful, but then
yeah.
I thought it was really interesting what you said, that you just done a podcast on balance and whether or not that is actually possible. And it just reminded me of this funny clip that I saw on Instagram about this Indian guy, and he does this. I'll send you the link actually. And he says he's very sweary, and he does all these little short funny clips where he says something like, we're all working towards work-life balance. But like, fuck work-life balance. There shouldn't be a balance. There should always be more life than like, we don't want balance. Like, if your life is balanced and you're doing as much work as life, then you're fucked, right? Like, like, we should be not looking for balance. We should be looking for more life than or that you're doing work that feels so satisfying, and that it doesn't feel like work, which is that's really what I'm trying to do, right? Like where your work feels like play, or that your work really is really holistically supporting the rest of your life. Yeah, it is hard. And I think there's so much of that, like, that FOMO that's built into it, you know, the fear of saying no, like, okay, if I don't, I mean, I think it's amazing that you're just like, yeah, I'm out for a while, I'm taking a break. But I'm sure there are a lot of people who would be terrified of doing that and think, oh my gosh, if I took this break, I'm never going to be able to get back in. Nobody,
I felt that. Yeah.
you know, this is going to be a gap on my CV. Or, you know, the thing that when people are still working, if I don't take on this project, if I say no, then when it comes to promotion time, I'm going to be overlooked and someone else is going to be promoted, right? Like all those kinds of fears.
In
So
there.
I think it's also about, you know, as well as building in, finding play and finding rest, it's also developing this unshakable self-trust that actually whether I say yes or not to this project, like I am so sure of what I bring to the table. And you have so much, you know, everyone has their own experiences and work experience and qualifications and all of that. You are going to be able to find another job, or you know, you may even be able to find a job that is even better than where you're at, that, you know, that respects your time off, that respects your needs as well, and actual balance, right? So yeah, I think that's the hard part, I think, as well, that's that element of developing that self-trust and developing a little bit of like a fuck it attitude of being like, you know, I don't care what people think. I'm very, very sure of what I'm capable of and what I bring to the table in any situation, and I don't need like your approval. I don't need to be following like the conventional ways forward. That I'm going to be okay. Like I have what it takes to look after myself.
Agreed.
I think, and I totally agree. And I think there's still a lot of that requirement in people for the external validation. And that I think is maybe something because of how we've grown up. But when you get to the point where you don't need it or it really doesn't matter, I think it changes everything. I think for me, it changed everything, because actually when I look at my priorities, it's like my family, my health, you know, my husband, and just like us being able to have great experiences together. And part of that, of course, will be, you know, I'm not going to lie and say like I don't want the bigger house, I don't need this, that, the other. Like there's still that element of materialism that is there. Let's not lie about it. But I'd much rather take that money and go on a really nice holiday, or, you know, be able to spend 2 weeks in Japan next year because we love it, they love it, and would have a great time. But I think, yeah, there's so much there, and I see it in a lot of people, a lot of my friends and ex-colleagues, where they do seek they still need people to
The validation.
praise them, and just to like ultimately, I wonder whether it's just like the people pleaser in you is hard to shake.
Yeah, and this it's a people pleaser, and it's also wanting, it's a little bit more than that as well. I think it's a sense of value, like, you know, how valuable you feel, and how worthy you feel, I guess. You know, if I'm not earning 6 figures or whatever, then I'm like less valuable. And this is very much tied into like the constant busyness as well, like tying our value to how much we're doing and how much we're outputting. Here's another good book for you. This is not a novel.
I love these recommendations.
This is a really good book.
Okay.
By Cal Newport. I haven't finished it. I'm sort of midway through it, but there's a bit where he talks about, you know, we're now in a space where a lot of us are in a knowledge economy, and the knowledge is not something you can measure. It's not like, you know, boxes of chocolate that, you know, you're producing in a factory, right? But because you can't measure how much knowledge is being generated, or, you know, or the kinds of work that we're doing now is not measurable, then we fall back on like the last point of reference that we have, which comes from like an industrialized age sort of time, which is, you know, measuring how many hours people worked and how, like, you know, how much you outputted. So then we try and fit like our working worlds now into that model, even though it doesn't, you know, you're really trying to fit a square egg into a round hole. But that's why we do this thing of like filling up our days with lots and lots of busyness, and we multitask. And, you know, if we can't measure like how much we're generating in terms of the knowledge that we're creating or whatever, then we will, you know, we will try and make up for it by the number of hours that we're working, or like the number of things that we have to do on our to-do list. Like we try and make it sort of measurable. Yeah, I mean, that it doesn't really it doesn't work like that, right? As you know, it doesn't really translate that way. I love this little parable as the story. It's called, I think it's called like The Businessman and the Fisherman or something. And I think you guys will all really appreciate this because it's such a Malaysian thing. Like, you know, when you go out to the kampongs or like the East Coast where the fishermen are, or not even that far away, like if you just went to like Kuala Selangor or something, like there's people's lives, like they fish in the morning and then they like sell the fish and then they just like chill the rest of the day, right? That's such a Malaysian thing. Like, let's do as little work as possible and then
they're living their best lives.
Like chill by the beach, right? Literally, like if you go to like the East Coast, just like hundreds of miles of beach, and you just see like families having picnics there in the middle of the work today, right? And so the story is something like, you know, there's a fisherman and he's just lying on the beach, basically, like just chilling out on the beach and having a nap. And this businessman comes along and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I've done my catch for the day, so I'm just relaxing now." And so the businessman is like, "Well, why don't you, how many boats do you have?" And the fisherman says, "I've only got one boat, it's just me." He's like, "Oh, why don't you get two boats?" And he's like, "Oh, why would I do that? Then you can catch more fish." He's like, "Okay, then what would I do with that?" "Then you can go to the market and sell more fish." "Okay, and then what?" "And then you make more money, then you can buy a bigger fleet of ships and boats, and then you could have like a whole empire of fishing boats. And then you could take it global, and then you could have like a whole fishing empire." And the fisherman was like, "Okay, well, why would I do that? Why would I do that?" And ultimately it comes back to, he's like, "Well, you know, then what you do is then you go public and you can sell like the whole fishing empire, and then you have loads of money, and then you can just do whatever you want, like, you know, just hang out on the beach all day." And then the fisherman is like, "Yeah, but
I
do that.
what are you doing that?" And I think that's exactly what you said, Alicia. Like, it's what are your priorities? Like, what is that core priority that's really driving you at the end of the day, right? And I think so many of us do this whole big round thing when actually what we want is quite simple. And that's why I love the Dull Women's Club so much, because I think the things that people celebrate in there, like that is the heart of actually what a lot of us want. You know, that kind of that privilege and that luxury of being so safe and like not worrying about anything, that you can take so much pleasure out of like a fresh load of laundry, or you know, a little crocheting project, or like, "Oh, that's for my allotment," you know, like those simple pleasures. Like that's what it comes down to at the end of it, right? Feeling safe, feeling like you have the things that you love around you, the people that you love around you, right?
feeling accomplished in your own way. Like, accomplishment doesn't have to be business, does it? Like, as a really simple example, I built this book nook. I'm very proud of that.
Love it.
And that's not a business thing. I did that because I wanted to, because I needed shelves for my book. I wanted to build a daybed, and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to do this side project.
Love it.
Something that's measurable.
Yeah.
It gives me a sense of accomplishment, and it's something I really enjoyed doing. It's something I'm really proud of now, and it isn't measurable. It's nothing to do with business. It's nothing to do with work or academia or any of that stuff. It's just something that I wanted to do, so I did.
And because you want to, like, you do it because you want to, like, what an amazing like luxury that is, right, to be able to do that. I think I worked with a coach once who, as I was talking to her, she said to me, she said to me that it sounds like ease is my currency. And I loved that she said that, because, okay, as Asians, it's all about the money, right? For us, like, how much are you earning? What car are you driving? How much is your house valued at? And that, for sure, that has definitely been ingrained in me as well. Like, you know, how successful you are equals, like, your monetary worth. But there are so many other things that we can consider a kind of currency as well, like pleasure and like that sense of accomplishment, ease for me, or fun, you know, like, or freedom, like,
do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. To choose and do whatever you want. Freedom over your days, spaciousness, time, you know, all of these things are currency as well. So yeah, I mean, I will definitely put my hand up and say, you know, my friends who are working in banks and are in corporate jobs, definitely they're earning like way more than I am. But I don't consider that more successful than me, because I am enjoying other things that maybe they don't, right? Like, I have freedom of time that they definitely don't. For example.
Very much.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us on Part 2 Book Club. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you, everyone, for listening and tuning in, as usual. And if you want to follow us on the socials, we are at Part2_Book Club on Instagram and at Part 2 Book Club on TikTok. You can find this podcast on all your general podcast platforms. Thanks. Love you all.